Glad you could join us today on EarthFile. Welcome to the program. I'm Ayola Kasim. The resulting richness of ecosystems and species, life below water, has sustained human civilization and development for millennia, from providing food and nourishment, material for handicraft and construction, to the very air we breathe. 50% of the oxygen on Earth is produced in the ocean every second breath we take. Yet, despite or precisely because of the perceived limitless nature of the oceans and marine living resources, their ability to sustain mankind and contribute to sustainable development has been severely impacted by unregulated or poorly managed human activities, including unregulated fisheries, pollution, and climate change. So for the very first time, the World Wildlife Day 2019 focused on marine species. And today on EarthFile, we'll focus on the life below water for people and planet. Just stay with us. The oceans, which cover 3/4 of the Earth's surface, play a vital role in the global climate system, generating oxygen and absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Today, more than 3.5 billion people depend on the oceans for their primary source of food, and an estimated 40 million people worldwide are employed directly by the $21 trillion ocean economy. Every day, our oceans contribute to poverty eradication, promote sustainable livelihoods and employment, as well as improve global food security and human health. They are also the primary regulator of the global climate and a vital sink for greenhouse gases. Despite their importance, oceans, seas, and marine resources are increasingly threatened, degraded, or destroyed by human activities, reducing their ability to provide crucial ecosystem services. Plastic waste alone kills up to 1 million seabirds, 100,000 sea mammals, and countless fish each year. Oceans also absorb about 30% of the carbon dioxide produced by humans, but there has been a 26% rise in ocean acidification since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Marine pollution, an overwhelming majority of which comes from land-based sources, is reaching alarming levels, with an average of 13,000 pieces of plastic litter to be found on every square kilometer of ocean. Moreover, death and disease caused by polluted coastal waters costs the global economy some $7.2 billion. Some 30% of the world's fish stocks are overexploited, reaching below the level at which they can produce sustainable yields.
Marine pollution, whether you look at ocean acidification, or whether you look at degraded coastal ecosystems or declining fish stocks, or the lack of governance out on the high seas, the ocean, human activity has put the ocean into deep problems. And so we have to find the solutions to those problems.
Changes to the climate brought about by increasing levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere will lead to changes in the oceans, including sea level rise and ocean acidification, which will put marine ecosystems and coastal communities at risk. Members and volunteers of the International Oceans Institute gathered at the Okolowo Beach in Magmalade in Lagos State. The visit is to educate the residents of the area on the best fishing practice.
In this community, there's a lot of fishing activities going on. I've discovered that this beach is not adding value to the ocean. You can see the plastic that they have collected. So even if it is plastic pollution alone, this community is not ocean compliant. So what we are doing about the ocean is to exploit the resources rationally and sustainably. If you keep on exploiting the fish and you don't allow them to grow by using the wrong mesh size, then the resources will deplenish. See the youth in this community, we don't allow them just stay fallow. When there is no fishing, they do their fish farming. We have taught them how to sustain themselves.
The ocean is filled with about 165 billion tons of plastics. And by 2050, plastics in the oceans are expected to outweigh fish. On its part, the United Nations Information Center in Lagos joined non-governmental organizations in their efforts to inform beachgoers of the dangers of dropping their litters on the shoreline.
We have come here to preach the gospel of using the ocean sustainably. We have come here to deliver the message of taking care of the ocean. We're talking about our ocean, our future. We are delivering the message that our future is dependent on the ocean. Our future is dependent on how we use the resources of the ocean. Our future is dependent on how we take care of the marine resources. Our future is dependent on the way we treat the ocean. And we are laying emphasis on pollution of the aquatic, of the marine resource of the ocean. And you can see we are picking and cleaning the beaches. We are picking the debris. We are picking all manners of debris, the plastic bottle, the water sachet, which have been dumped on the beach. And when they get back into the ocean, or when they get into the ocean, they affect the aquatic ecosystem. So that is the message we are trying to deliver to the community. Of course, the community, they dumped them there. Or probably those who have visited the beach did that. But the message is that, well, we have found all this debris there and we are picking them. We don't want them back on the beach. So that is the message one. Then, and that is related to the pollution. Then the other message, which is in line with the Sustainable Development Goal 14, which is use the resources of the ocean sustainably. And you know, the occupation of this community is fishing. How do they fish? How do they take both the young and the fully developed ones? Do they harvest fingerling? Are they happy when they find the small fishes in their net? You know, under ideal situation, they're supposed to return them to the ocean. That is how to use the resources of the ocean sustainably. So these are some of the things we are talking about.
Plastic debris is often buoyant, but it eventually may break down and settle on the seafloor. An accumulation of this debris on the seabed may affect the organisms present. Humans are also affected by the marine debris. For instance, plastic bags can cause economic losses to recreational boats when they block water intakes and result in burnt-out water pumps. Boats and ships can also incur costly repairs when derelict fishing gear such as nets and ropes get entangled around propellers and rudders.
What it does is that it seals up the lagoon. And therefore, water transport, anybody trying to put a ferry, as Lagos State and several private individuals have tried to do, have not succeeded. They've not succeeded because the bottom, which is supposed to take the water, the propeller of the boat or the ferry they are putting there keeps getting clogged with plastic material. And the economic impact of that is really horrendous. And we are aware of several entrepreneurs who have had to abandon the water transport business because they couldn't get their boats to move in the water. Each time they try to do so, their propellers get clogged with plastics and netting material and styrofoam and all that, and destroys the propeller. And therefore, they think it's not profitable business for them. Now, imagine if they succeeded. Imagine the reduction on the roads, in terms of being able to ferry people by transport. Take being able to ferry people, say, from Marina to Ikorodu or from Marina to Ajah on the water body. It will reduce what we see in terms of traffic on our roads.
World leaders acknowledged the importance of the oceans when they adopted the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the universal blueprint for ending poverty, protecting the planet, and ensuring that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. The Sustainable Development Goal 14 sets out specific targets to be met in order to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development.
The momentum swelling from this ocean conference is immense. It's beating against the mindlessness of marine pollution. It's driving the muck back from where it came, for recycling or for abstinence. It's propelling rationality for the good of all into the elimination of harmful fisheries subsidies and decisive action to end destructive and illegal fishing practices. It'll carry us forward to sustainable fisheries management and the restoration of fish stocks in the shortest feasible time.
Although the ocean is the single largest habitat on the planet and is linked to human survival, climate change and the impact of increasing carbon dioxide emissions on the oceans have been largely overshadowed in the climate change debate. The oceans, which produce half of the world's oxygen, regulate the Earth's climate and temperature, provide food and water, and are home to hundreds of thousands of species, have been a staunch ally in curbing climate change. More than 93% of all the heat people have added to the planet since the 1950s has been absorbed by the oceans, but at a price. Rising ocean temperatures and increased acidification are now becoming apparent in melting Arctic sea ice and coral bleaching. Immediate mitigation, protection, restoration and adaptation actions are needed.
Rich countries need also to support developing countries that don't have waste management, that don't have the proper recycling possibilities, but there are techniques to do that. And also we need the private sector, we need the enterprises to take their responsibility on single-use plastics, on not overfishing, and on being more transparent. So there's so many things that we need to do, but I think what's important, we really put it all on the table, making it so evident for the whole world that we can't let this go on for another year even. We have to take action now.
From available research statistics, the sea level has risen by 20 centimeters since the start of the 20th century, due mostly to thermal expansion of the oceans and melting of glaciers and ice caps. Some regions are experiencing even greater sea level rise. General warming trends, massive episodes of coral bleaching, acidification, and sea level rise are affecting ecosystems in all regions, threatening fisheries, food chains, and the ocean's ability to act as efficient carbon sinks.
SDG 14 on the ocean and the Paris Climate Agreement are essential for the safety of our species on this planet. And now is the time to act on both of them. The good news is that the great mass of humanity, the great mass of governments all understand this, and we're behind it together in the great agreements which we reached in 2015 on these two matters.
Warmer temperatures are causing more extreme weather events, and a projected 2-meter rise in sea levels by the end of the century would be catastrophic for coastal habitats and economies. Hundreds of millions of people are at risk.
Climate change is an integral part of the whole conversation on Agenda 2030 and the 17 goals. Without cognizance and action on that, every one of the goals will be affected, and the ocean goal as well. We know that climate change is having effect on the seas, the warming, the loss of our reefs, the loss of livelihoods, and possibly with rising sea levels we will see many coastlines, infrastructure, people's lives, people's identity wiped out.
Particularly at risk are the inhabitants of small island states, with hurricanes, cyclones and tsunamis becoming increasingly more common threats. According to the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, losses due to disasters from natural and man-made hazards, including floods, storms, and the impact of climate change are mounting, costing governments over $300 billion globally each year. The United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction recently aligned its Disaster Resilience Scorecard, which provides a set of overarching assessments on disaster resilience with a Sendai framework, boosting the number of cities and towns capable of reducing their disaster losses by 2020. The first ever United Nations Summit on Oceans wrapped up on Friday, the 9th of June 2017, with a global agreement to reverse the decline of the ocean's health, and more than 1,300 pledged actions for protecting the blue.
The sea indeed belongs to all of us. Improving the health of our oceans is a test for multilateralism, and we cannot afford to fail. We must jointly address the problems of governance that have held us back. I am aware that there are many obstacles to progress, but we need a new strategic vision, and I call on all member states to engage in the dialogue necessary to define a new model for the future governance of our oceans. Unless we overcome the territorial and resource interests that have blocked progress for far too long, the state of our oceans will continue to deteriorate. We must put aside short-term national gain to prevent long-term global catastrophe. Conserving our oceans and using them sustainably is preserving our life itself.
May I take it that the conference wishes to adopt draft resolution A/conf 230/L1? I hear no objection. It is so decided.
The Ocean Conference ended on Friday, the 9th of June, with the adoption by consensus of a 14-point call for action, where the participating heads of state and government and senior representatives affirm their strong commitment to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development.
The ocean needs to be saved, not only for our generation, but for our children and their children as well. The time for action is now, and the voluntary commitments made during these dialogues are an important step in the right direction. Yes, the ocean is rising, but so are we.
The main points from the political document and the week's discussions will be part of the United Nations High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development, the United Nations central body for follow-up and review of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals adopted in September 2015.
Global consciousness has now been raised, such that no one can say that they were not aware of the ocean's problems. Neither will they be able to say that they have not been alerted to the many solutions that are now ours to deliver on. We must move forward with determination and with a sense of urgency.
The week-long conference, where some 6,000 people participated, was the first time that the United Nations brought everyone together to discuss the challenges facing the world's oceans. Topics that were discussed ranged from plastic pollution in the oceans and seas to oceans acidification and illegal fishing, which tie in with topics of alleviating poverty, ending hunger, promoting health, ensuring access to water and sanitation.
Even Sweden, my home country, which has a big reputation for being environmentally friendly, also our own neighboring sea, the Baltic Sea, is one of the most polluted seas in the world. So of course we need to make sure that others don't repeat our mistakes, and we also have a special responsibility.
The Ocean Conference, the first United Nations conference of its kind on the issue, has raised global consciousness of ocean problems ranging from marine pollution to illegal and overfishing.
193 member countries is not a small constituency, and every one of them can take a decision to lead their own countries with the responsibilities they have against what it is that they do to the detriment of this life on our planet. And I think that that's very important for us to get across. You have a responsibility to your countries and your people first, but you also have a moral obligation to the world that you live on.
Humanity owes much to the oceans in many aspects of life, providing invaluable ecosystems, climate regulation, and cultural support to the millions of people who live near the sea. As 3 billion people ultimately depend on marine and coastal biodiversity, all nations agree on the need to step up efforts to protect oceans and seas, especially in the area of climate change, when transformational interventions are becoming even more urgent and encompassing.
We cannot continue to dump plastic into the global oceans. If we continue at the present rate, the weight of plastic will be the same as the weight of fish by 2050. This is a huge issue in many dimensions. It's a huge economic issue for many developing states and also developed states. 80% of the plastic in the oceans is coming from land, not from shipping and fishing or an activity at sea. And we need to stop it at source. And that is about making recyclable plastic systems, making degradable plastic, and it's about simply cutting down on the use and move to other alternatives. Of course, we also want to work with the plastic industry. They need to change. They need to change into recyclable plastic, to degradable plastic, and we need alternative products made from sugar canes or bamboo or whatever it may be. All this can be done. This is, in a way, one of the easier tasks to take upon, and I'm confident that we will resolve it, but we need a strong engagement from everyone, governments, citizens, and business.
For more than 50 years, global production of plastic has continued to rise. Some 299 million tons of plastics were produced in 2013, representing a 4% increase over 2012. Recovery and recycling, however, remain insufficient, and millions of tons of plastics end up in landfills and oceans each year.
The net effect of this plastic material is the fact that they are not degradable. That is, they cannot disappear. You can't do anything about them, which is one of the advantages why we started using them in the first instance. But it has now turned out to be a big problem. Now, these plastics are used in our different homes. They're supposed to be packaged and sent to a proper landfill. But in most developing countries, this is not the case. Instead, these plastics and plastic material end up in our canals and our streams and our rivers. Now, these plastics then move from these canals and these streams into bigger water bodies, the rivers. The rivers empty into a lagoon, as in the case of Lagos, and this lagoon then ends up in the ocean. So the Atlantic Ocean and what we call the Gulf of Guinea right now is overloaded with these plastic materials. Go into any municipality, any area of our country now. Our gutters, our canals, our streams, you will find huge tons of plastics and plastic type material in the gutters. Where are they coming from? They are coming from municipal waste. Our municipal waste is poorly managed, which is another issue, another problem. The fact that we do not handle municipal waste properly, municipal solid waste. So a lot of people use the rivers as their emptying ground for this municipal waste. It has now become a global issue that UNEP, the United Nations Environment Programme, has now established special programs for marine litter and plastics. The focus of that special program is how can we reduce marine litter, how can we reduce plastics going into our oceans.
Conservationists are urging that the oceans are part of the solution and they must be a key focus of global efforts to cope with and mitigate climate change. That's our program for the day. Thank you for watching. Please join us next week for another episode of the program. You can get in touch by using any of our feedback channels and can also view this episode by visiting our website, channelstv.com. Do click on programs and then click EarthFile. We'll see you next week.